I knew we'd be talking about today, which is the arrest of Linda Sun, who was a Chinese agent working in the New York government. She served under two New York governors, both Cuomo and Hochul. So, Miles, what makes her a Chinese agent, and what is the history here, the context that we need to know?
She's an alleged agent, was arrested last week along with her husband. Well, an agent is anyone who concealed his or her real identity in another country, working undercover for the interest of the Chinese Communist Party, but not for the country he or she is a citizen of. Most of them are not necessarily James Bond type. Many of them were ordinary American citizens who betrayed their country, often for three reasons: ideological conviction, financial greed, or personal aggrandizement.
So go into each one of those. How do they play into this case?
Well, ideological conviction usually is the most important motive, including disillusion with the American democracy, with the problems inside the US. Some are downright members of the communist organizations. Every time the US political and economic system is in crisis, such as Great Depression, the Vietnam War, there are large numbers of Americans who would fall for the communist false prophecy that the future of mankind does not belong to democratic capitalism, but communist utopia. Therefore, they would willingly work for the enemy of freedom, such as Soviet Union during the Great Depression and Cold War, and presently the Communist China. We all know the infamous Alger Hiss spy case in 1950s. What the world knows less are the American spies working hard during World War II for the Chinese Communist Party. Those guys were sabotaging Americans' foreign policy of supporting the KMT nationalist government. The two most famous spies were Frank Cole and Adler Solomon of the US Treasury Department, who were in charge of managing wartime financial assistance to the nationalist government of China. But in fact, they were working to sabotage FDR's China policy. Now, the interesting thing about Frank Cole and Solomon Adler is that after World War II, both gentlemen fled to Communist China and worked for the CCP espionage and United Front work departments until their death in Beijing in 1980s. They both falsely claimed to be victims of McCarthyism, but in reality, they were CCP spies working inside the US government. Anyone who is interested in this topic should really read Whittaker Chambers' incredible memoir called Witness, which documents his journey from a disillusioned American young man during the Great Depression to a communist spy in the 1930s and 1940s, and again to an American patriot who outed Alger Hiss as a Soviet spy in the 1950s. Much more germane to the New York case in Linda Sun is a different kind of ideologically motivated espionage. A primary cover for ideological spies is ethnic identity, which places many loyal Chinese Americans at risk of being recruited into working for the CCP. A false narrative is always carried out in the name of ethnic equity and racial diversity. Linda Sun's indictment is a case in point. The indictment document reveals that most of the alleged treasonous acts she performed on behalf of the CCP were done in the capacity of her as a senior director of Ethnic Diversity Office of the New York State, placing her as the gatekeeper of the entire Chinese American community in New York State, which is the second largest Chinese diaspora community in the nation, second only to California.
Yeah. Wow.
So her alleged treasonous acts were always covered by righteous ideological camouflage of promoting ethnic diversity on behalf of the Chinese American community. Many Chinese Americans, particularly elite Chinese Americans with incredible personal and professional accomplishments, fall for what the Linda Suns are promoting, subtly but very effectively. And that is, unfortunately, has become a mainstream thinking in the nation. What is this thing that Linda Suns were promoting? Well, any criticism or attack on the Chinese Communist regime in Beijing is easily misconstrued as criticisms or attacks on Chinese American community in the United States, which is maddeningly poisonous to our national security. I'll give you one example. During the Trump administration, after China falsely accused the U.S. Army as the deliberate spreader of coronavirus to the world, President Donald Trump was so outraged that he used the phrase China virus to refute Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson's outrageous accusation. This use of the phrase China virus by President Trump was clearly a criticism of Chinese spokesperson, but it drew national condemnation from the media, especially from the elites within the Chinese American diaspora, which are those people were completely incapable of telling the differences. Well, what's worse, this mindless overreaction from some of the Chinese American community leaders, in my view, have created a gradually formed dangerous national awareness that is extremely detrimental to the well-being and safety of the entire Chinese American diaspora in the United States. That is to say, if any criticism of CCP is criticism to the Chinese American community, then many people would think these Chinese Americans are essentially automatically align themselves, not with the US, but with the Chinese Communist Party. This national awareness, though not fully formed yet, is pernicious and harmful because it does not reflect reality. The reality is that overwhelming majority of Chinese Americans are patriotic anti-communist Americans. They will be victimized by this gradually formed national awareness that criticizing the CCP is the same as criticizing the Chinese Americans. So in my view, the right way to approach this is to take side with the US government by condemning the CCP's intransigence against open and thorough investigation into the origin of the coronavirus, fighting against China's repression of the Chinese people, helping the US government at all levels against unlawful hate speech by real ignorant bigots and racists, while endorsing American system as extraordinarily generous, fair, humane, welcoming places for Chinese immigrants and Chinese Americans. This is the only way to tell the American society and educate them about one fundamental reality, that the interest of the CCP and that of the Chinese Americans are completely different. To do otherwise, seems to me, is nothing but the miracle of stupidity.
So you cited three main motivators here. The two we haven't covered are essentially ego and money. Can you detail those and how they apply to this case?
Well, first of all, financial greed is obvious. Linda Sun and her husband got paid back handsomely by the CCP, directly or indirectly, mostly indirectly, by the millions of dollars. Okay? Countless former senior government officials, retired and corporate military leaders are doing tremendous monkey business with the CCP regime. They're very vulnerable. I mean, personal aggrandizement is also easy to understand. The CCP is expert in working your egos. Professional disenchantment at work with regard to promotion, lightness of being, arrogance, and hubris. That's why so many brilliant but underappreciated elites become spies. You look at the, Alfred Ames, Robert Hansen, many of the guys who were kind of feel like they were underappreciated, and they work for the enemy of freedom. So right now, after the death of Dr. Henry Kissinger, who is a tremendous American, there is a competition for who will be the next chief proxy of China in the U.S. You have some dumb Harvard professors in the race. Also in the race are some rather despicable Wall Street double-faced tycoons. The list goes on and on. So they're all vulnerable too.
And so she really ticked all of the boxes, all of the motivators, huh?
In a way, so. In a way, also. But for example, if you are just a college professor, you feel like you're somebody, but you feel you're so brilliant that you're smarter than your leaders, national leaders, elected officials, and then you're nobody except that you teach students in the classroom. You go to China. China wants you to be their proxy. They would give you access to the senior leader of Chinese Communist Party, you feel like you're somebody, and you come back acting like a communist or of the Chinese Communist Party in the United States, and then you obviously take a side on the other side. Willingly or unwillingly, you become the agent of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah. And so, they've clearly got people here. She fell prey to this. But is there a larger spy culture and a tradition here that China has, not only in our country, but around the world?
Oh, yeah. China has a very rich spy culture. I mean, go back, everybody's quoted in Art of War by Sun Tzu, right?
Yeah.
And in Sun Tzu, one of the very important chapter talks about employment of spies. Sun Tzu said there are 5 types of spies. And I'll let you figure out which type of spy Linda Sun would fit in, right?
Okay, we'll play a game.
The first type of spy is called the local spy, also known as the village spies. Village spies. Those were basically people in the other country, but they're giving information to you, and not basically in the local spy. They know the local population, they have the local cover. Another type of spy is called the inner spies. Those are spies who were officials of the enemy country, but they're employed by you. The third type of spy is converted spies. Those were the spies of the enemy spies. Basically, they're double agents, right?
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is called the death spies. Those were people who sent to disinform the enemy and to spread false reports through your spies already in the enemy's lines. The last type of spies is called the living spies. Those were basically traditional, classically defined in the modern times as the James Bond type.
Yeah.
You penetrate into enemy's inner circle, and then you spy, you steal, and then you report back. So the Chinese strategic culture historically plays a very important value on deceit and disinformation.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily kind of a straightforward, the Western type of spy that's sent over there to steal and to film and send back to report.
Right.
No, it's very comprehensive, as you say. This is the tradition.
We've got different spies serving different purposes, right?
Yeah. The most importantly, Sun Tzu said you must employ the 5 types of spies all at the same time simultaneously.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't work.
So would you put her in the inside spy basket?
I'll let you figure out. I'll let the court to figure out.
I like it. So what is the CCP's modern adaptation of these to create their current spy culture?
Well, CCP's modern adaptation of the rich Chinese spy culture is obvious. It's had different name. It's called the United Front work.
Okay, and what is that?
Okay, so Mao Zedong famously said in late 1940s that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, has 3 magic weapons. First and foremost is the United Front. Secondly, it's armed struggle. Thirdly, is party construction. Basically, party cells everywhere.
Yep.
Right? Now, United Front work is a very comprehensive CCP mission. It basically consists of 3 parts. One is elite capture, as well as proxy cultivation. Second type is called subnational infiltration. And thirdly is disinformation and propaganda. Let me just go through this very briefly, one by one. About elite capture and proxy cultivation, the United Front work primarily focuses on this mission. That is, you capture enemies' elites and you make them your proxy. The CCP's best minds in China, those people who know the United States inside out, and who are expert, very well trained, they are not in the West to promote CCP policy directly.
Yeah.
They never do. But they would be sent to different think tanks, universities, and research institutions, local, state, and federal governments to cultivate proxies, to fund their proxies, which result in a phenomenon we generally call panda hogging. Panda hogging is a very big business in the United States in particular. Almost all of CCP's key propaganda points, main policies, are conveyed to the West, not through the CCP leaders themselves, but through this captured elites, these panda huggers.
Right.
I call them the China brokers. Many of them are granted exclusive access to the senior CCP leadership, which in turn greatly enhances these people's prestige and mystique of power in the West. Well, corporations pay these people millions of dollars and ask for favor, ask them to convey to the Chinese leaders their wish to be treated nicely for their China operations by the CCP autocrats. Senior government officials who are denying normal access to CCP mandarins rely heavily on these CCP proxies for insights and clues. There was a movie called China Syndrome. I don't know if you have seen this or not.
No, I haven't.
You're too young to watch this. That was a Hollywood fiction. But this is the real China Syndrome in Washington. And the first of the 12-step healing programs for this did not take place until Donald Trump came to Washington, especially under Mike Pompeo's State Department leadership, for which I served as a China advisor. Secretary Pompeo was keenly aware of the CCP's infiltration in the United States, and he made very important speeches. The most important of them were three. So he made three speeches. Number one, I think the most comprehensive one, he delivered to the National Governors Association on February 8th, 2020. In that speech, he comprehensively laid out the various aspects of China's United Front work on subnational governments, mostly local and state governments. And the second speech he made was in September 2020. He delivered this at the Wisconsin Senate in Madison, Wisconsin. And what you also talk about how the CCP government works on the state politicians to convey and deliver their demands. The third speech, which happened to be Secretary Pompeo's last official travel, took place on December 9th, 2020. He gave the speech at the Georgia Tech on Chinese government infiltration on American campuses, how their work, their United Front work, has damaged Americans' academic freedom and scholarly integrity. I was with him on all three occasions and was intimately familiar with the contents of those far-sighted speeches. And for listeners who want to read all of them or watch the video, you can easily find them either YouTube or the State Department website.
Okay, well, people can check that out for a little bit more on that topic if they'd like to. But moving on, Miles, you're going to have to explain this one for me. This sounds like a run-of-the-mill traffic accident turned road rage incident, but it is stirring up a political crisis of sorts in China. So what happened here? And then we can get into what it all means at a societal level.
You know, the major political earthquakes normally takes place after a small minor incident, which reflect a really larger societal problem.
Right.
In this case, so on August 28th, there was a 38-year-old woman in Qingdao, a major city on the east coast of China.
Okay.
She was driving a car, but she drove on the wrong side of the highway. And then when she realized she was trying to get back on the right side of the highway, but the SUV driver would not yield, causing the lady rear-ended a tourist bus in front of her. This was in slow motion because there was traffic jam, basically.
Okay.
So the lady got out of the car and slapped and struck the 26-year-old SUV driver dozens of times, causing nose bleeding and facial swelling.
Okay.
So throughout the whole process, the young man remained calm and didn't strike back at all. This whole incident, the whole process was filmed by bystanders stuck in the traffic.
Okay, yeah.
So they posted this video clips online, but that was not a problem because there's dozens of stuff like this that online every day in China. People are used to it. The problem is threefold. Number one, the police report posted online was incendiary because this lady was given extraordinarily light punishment. She was ordered to stay in detention center for 10 days. She was fined 1,000 yuan, which is equivalent to about $135. Now, this is not really that appropriate in the eyes of most people who are watching these videos because it was very violent. This lady she was known in China right now throughout the nation as a road tiger lady.
Okay.
It also further revealed that this road tiger lady is rumored to be the mistress of the local police chief. Now, I'm not sure whether this is true or not because there's no clear evidence to prove that is the case.
Okay.
But even if it's not true, but the power of rumor is sizable and very devastating because it is so commonplace that police chiefs have mistresses all across the nation.
Oh, geez.
And those mistresses were becoming very, very arrogant and abusive. So it was known nationwide as bad elements. But the most importantly, the third thing that really makes this whole thing a minor political crisis, I would say, is that it was further revealed that the victim is a 26-year-old Army veteran, and Chinese veterans are not treated very well, and they have become a major source of political instability for the CCP regime.
Huh.
Remember, several months ago, you got thousands of veterans converge to Beijing to send a petition to the central government and demanding better treatment because many of them were basically unemployed; they couldn't find a job.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So after the fact that this SUV driver, the victim of this road tiger lady, was a 27-year-old Army veteran who behaved very well during the entire process, and you got a national outrage going on. Busloads of veterans from all over the country converged to Qingdao City to show support for their fellow veteran victim and demanded a fair reinvestigation. Now, this is really, really something that's very exciting to a lot of people inside China watching this because veterans, they know how to use violent means to accomplish missions. And they're very well organized. They're very, very pissed off right now by the regime. So that's why this become such a very important event going on. So China is basically powder keg, ready to explode any moment.
What does this incident, which seems to be a larger issue about treatment of veterans, say about Chinese society today?
I would say, basically, it's it means that there is a prevalent disenchantment against Chinese government. Particularly, those disenchantment was sort of manifest themselves in a very specific way. Now, Chinese police are very hated people in China. I mentioned in one of the episodes earlier that one of the national heroes among the Chinese people is a young man by the name of Yang Jia. Now, Yang Jia was a guy who was a lone bicyclist in Shanghai. He was mistreated and abused by the Shanghai police. So he was asking for sort of apology. The police in Shanghai refused to follow his demand. So this guy, a young man, and just went into the police station and used a machete and killing 6 cops.
Jeez.
So he was promptly executed, of course. But this man, Yang Jia, has become a national hero. Many people view him as sort of somebody who did justice for themselves. So this is actually a very, very twisted nation right now. A murderer become a hero.
Why are the police so hated? Is it just brutal tactics, or is they're seen as just an arm of the party that they can actually, physically, are they a physical representation of the party in their neighborhoods, or where's it coming from?
You said it very well. They're the willing executioners of the brutal regime. So they're the ones that maintain daily contact with the enemy of their government, that is the people. So that's why they were really, really hated. And of course, the veterans, obviously, they were supposed to be the willing executioner of the regime, but after they were discharged and they go home and they face reality. Reality is pretty brutal for them. They're not guaranteed a job, and their pension is kind of very, very inadequate. So you have a lot of disenchantment there. But all this points to one thing. You asked me about what does it mean. It means one thing, that China is a politically unstable country. People want to change. And they also testify to the power of the internet. And any tiny incident can make a lot of big booms, a lot of big bangs in China. So this is something that we should be very careful about.
Yeah, well, we'll keep our eye out for other small microcosms of larger issues. Our final topic today is about Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te, who gave a recent interview on Taiwanese TV and said that China's bid to annex is driven not by territorial integrity, but by ambitions to alter the, quote, rules-based world order. And then he shifted and talked about a different territory that isn't Taiwan. Miles, could you explain what he went on to talk about and why it matters?
So on the 100th day anniversary of his new government, President Lai Ching-te, also known as William Lai, went on the Taiwanese TV show hosted by this lady called Zhang Yaqing. Her nickname is Catherine Chang. And during which President Lai said, China's intent to invade Taiwan is really not about maintaining territorial integrity. If that were the China's intent, they would have asked Russia to return all the territories taken by Russia and willingly give away by the Chinese Communist government.
I love it.
So he turned the table on China. And this is really interesting because since 19th century, Russia grabbed a lot of what was then Manchu dynasty's territory. And China right now is in no position to ask to return because they're strategic partners. Even during the Cold War, even after China and Soviet Union split over who should be the leader of the global international communist movement, and China sort of acquiesced to this kind of deals made in the 1950s. So China gave away territory to Russia dozens of times bigger than the territory size of Taiwan.
Yeah.
So that's what President Lai was talking about. The interesting thing is, Russia responded. Russia said, it's none of your business, and because China and Russia's territory issue have been settled in 2004 by then Secretary General Jiang Zemin and Vladimir Putin, and therefore we have no border dispute. Taiwan, who the heck are you? Taiwan is part of China, so that's basically all those things. The funny thing is, the CCP has not responded directly to this. They are in a very awkward situation because what President Lai said is absolutely true. But if they say something about the truth, and they're alienating the Russian friend and ally. By the way, China is totally on the side of Russia for invasion of Ukraine.
Right.
So this is why it's important. So I think, President Lai, I don't know whether he intended to do this or not, but actually did something remarkably wise and very sophisticated in my view.
It was a really nice, clever diplomatic move to shift attention and point out an oxymoron in the Chinese policies and ambitions. So
you're absolutely true. I published a short article several months ago for the Hoover Institution in which I analyzed the theoretical foundation and the historical tendency of China's border strategy and why China's border strategy is ideologically motivated. In other words, China is totally willing to give away what is supposed to be China's dominant sort of sovereign domain, the size of 30, 40 times of Taiwan's, to its friendly, ideologically aligned countries like the Soviet Union and now Russia and Mongolia, People's Republic of Mongolia at the time, and all those countries who are friendly to China, like Burma. China gave away a lot of territories to Burma. No problem with that. So that has nothing to do with territorial integrity. So China's intent to invade Taiwan is purely based upon what Mao said, the unfinished revolution. You got to continue this whole thing. Chinese government spokesperson said this was a continuation of 1949 communist revolution. So it's sort of animated by that kind of ideological zeal. I will also say that because Taiwan is a very successful democracy, Taiwan's impact on the mainland Chinese people is enormous. That's why they're so afraid of freedom and democracy, which is manifested by Taiwan and Taiwan's success.
Yeah, friend now, territorial dispute later, which is maybe why China's staying so tight-lipped. They're giving themselves options in the future if they ever needed to.
欢迎来到六度解析新闻背后的多维思考，带你洞悉头条背后的世界。在今日华尔街频道的六度解析中，我们将深入探究时事热点，为你揭开新闻背后的真相。在这个信息泛滥、真相难觅的时代，六度解析应运而生。我运用海量数据、 人工智能整合以及专家观点，层层剥析每个故事，通过实时背景数据挖掘，确保你获得全面的新闻资讯。然而，我们关注的不仅仅是数据，更重要的是将它们串联起来。我将分析多方视角，揭示隐藏的脉络，为你提供单一媒体常常忽略的背景信息。无论是政治、经济，还是全球事务，我都将为你带来最具洞察力的分析。试想一下，拥有洞悉全局的能力，做出明智的决策，参与有意义的讨论，这就是6度解析带给你的价值。它不仅仅是新闻分析，更是一种赋能的工具。加入今日华尔街的6度解析，共同探索头条背后的故事。你通往深度理解的旅程，从这里开始。不要只是阅读新闻，要解码新闻，理解新闻，活出新闻。这一切尽在6度解析。立即订阅，不错过任何真知灼见。因为了解真相仅仅是个开始。